him, who did he ask about where to find food? Philip. Well, what does the Gospel of John tell us? Philip was from Bethsaida. So he knew that that was the area. It really isn't any question about where it was in the sense of the general region. It's on the east side, northeast side, and they end up on the northwest side. But Mark himself says that they end up over there at Gennesaret. And so a simple reading of pros as alongside is hermeneutical gymnastics. So the default is to assume that Mark doesn't know what he's talking about, even when a few verses later he does know what he's talking about. Because it says, when they had crossed over. Mark 6:53. When they had crossed over. Where were they? Were they at Bethsaida? No. Do most of us remember what we wrote just a few sentences ago? You'd think so. You'd think so. And you would think that a Christian scholar might default to trusting Mark, but that's not what you end up getting here. So let's go back to Are you gonna have to fix things? Yeah. It's a new program, is what he said earlier. It's different than it used to be, and so it takes longer to get it back into the right size or something, I guess. So how are you today? So what's that? You're ready. All right. I was gonna say everything's fine down here. How are you? Okay, here we go.
Right. So they're supposed to cross over to Bethsaida and they land in Capernaum. So was Jesus wrong then, or what? And someone might say, well, they got in the boat. They were supposed to cross to Bethsaida. Maybe they walked far away from Bethsaida and he told them to get in the boat and go on back. Well, how come the boat's over there when they landed in Bethsaida? That's a problem. But then it could be, okay, they get in the boat, they're supposed to go to Bethsaida, they get blown off course, they end up at Capernaum. Well, the problem is, according to John's gospel, when they landed there, it says they landed where they had intended. So I think that's one of the most difficult ones. That looks more like just probably Mark is confused.
Okay, there's the statement. I don't know how you can meaningfully define the doctrine of inerrancy and at the same time say, Mark was confused. He's got it wrong. It's no big deal. And I know this is how a lot of people deal with it. They get tired of dealing with, you've got all this information from these different sources, just tired of the whole thing. It just doesn't matter. It's, all that matters is the message. And so Mark just got confused. But what's more likely? In light of the fact that I can guarantee you, I know that Dr. Lycona travels a lot, and I can guarantee you that if we had somehow magically kept track of everything he's ever said about his travels, we would catch him in numerous statements that were not technically how we would understand them. But he would say, well, wait, come on. I took all these different flights. I was just summarizing. If you just understood what I meant was we passed by. Oh. So it's okay for us today to do that. But looking at Mark, we have to default to Mark was confused? Wouldn't it be better to say we should give Mark the room to have said both of these things and to remember what he said? And to not assert contradiction in Mark himself, let alone between Mark and Luke? And if these are the guys that are so big on Mark and priority, and Luke is just slavishly editing Mark, so Mark got it wrong and Luke corrected him? I mean, that's what our Muslim friends say. So is that where we're standing now? like I said, I was pretty surprised about this, and most everybody else was too.
That's a difficult one. I think the infancy narrative.
Okay, so that was the end of that. Is it really hermeneutical gymnastics to start with innocent until proven guilty? Is it really hermeneutical gymnastics to not assert an internal contradiction to Mark himself, especially in something as ambiguous as directions in the ancient world, when they didn't even have maps the way we have them today? I was taken aback. So then he moves on from that to the birth narratives. Now, again, we've spent a lot of time in years past, especially around Christmas time, talking about birth narratives, and Matthew and Luke. You aren't going to talk about Mark there because Mark doesn't have any, and John sort of abandons all that by going all the way back to eternity, which makes sense. But when we look at Mark and Luke, very, 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 very clear. I mean, just think for a second, folks. I get really frustrated with scholarly types, because when you think about it, if you just step back for a moment and just look at it, neither Matthew nor Luke are even pretending to give us the whole story of Jesus' infancy or his young life. It's obvious, isn't it? Each author has to be given the freedom to include in his narrative that which is going to make it a coherent narrative in light of the audience to which he's writing. And Matthew and Luke are not writing to the same audience. Is that really a debatable thing? I don't think it is. It's very, very clear that they are writing to different audiences, which is why they express themselves in different ways, and it's why they choose different elements to include in their story, and especially at the beginning of their narratives, even in a different order. Now, of course, if you think that they're all looking at each other, or however you figure out the alleged dependence, literary dependence of one upon another, it raises all sorts of wild, crazy questions. But when we come to the birth narratives themselves,